Now, a Hong Kong human rights activist who tried to escape China on a speedboat last year has been charged under Beijing's new national security law. He's reportedly in a psychiatric hospital, possibly being tortured. His future is truly frightening. 30-year-old Andy Lee was fleeing to Taiwan when he was intercepted by Chinese police. He spent the last 7 months in prison. The charges against him are very serious: conspiring to lobby foreign countries for sanctions against Hong Kong, conspiracy, and possession of ammunition without a license. Andy has been denied any access to his family or his lawyers. His case is described by the people who are backing him as emblematic of the Chinese government's ruthless crackdown on Hong Kong's way of life and a disregard for the international treaties designed to protect it. An international human rights campaign is fighting for his release, and his friend at the forefront of this battle is Luke de Pulford, director of Arise, an anti-slavery charity, and also the director of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Welcome, Luke, from the UK. Look, a human rights activist racing to escape in a speedboat, accused of conspiracy, now rotting in jail without access to his lawyers. I mean, just how much trouble is Andy Lee in?
Well, Sherry, first of all, thank you very much for raising this case. It is exceptionally serious. Andy is in much more trouble than he should be. And the best indication of that is how seriously the Chinese authorities are taking his case. He had an appearance in court last week. He turned up, and he was accompanied by something in the region of 20 police officers on motorcycles, a huge motorcade of vehicles, indicating that they want to try to show the world that they believe that this guy is dangerous. This was the first time that Andy had been seen for at least 7 months after he just disappeared into a Chinese prison in Shenzhen and has now been returned to Hong Kong. So what's pretty clear is that the Hong Kong authorities are trying to make out that Andy, this skinny computer scientist from Hong Kong, that Andy Lee is some kind of dangerous criminal. And most analysts will tell you that that's because it's the state trying to tee up a very serious sentence for Andy. So all of the evidence seems to suggest they want to make an example of Andy, and that's a very serious thing indeed.
Look, you talk about, the seriousness of the situation and the charges he's facing, charges that he colluded with foreign powers. Where does this rank in terms of, seriousness for the Chinese when it comes to charging a Hong Kong citizen who was trying to flee?
Well, let's be clear. First of all, Andy Lee hasn't done anything wrong. He's a peace-loving Democrat and a true Hong Kong patriot. In any normal system, he'd be celebrated. In China, they put him in prison. So how does it rank in terms of their crimes? Well, these are arbitrary crimes and they're new. But they mean, ultimately, what the Chinese Communist Party wants them to mean. But the maximum sentence for the things which are levelled against Andy is life imprisonment. And as I said before, we think it's likely that they're going to want to make an example of him because he was very close to the grassroots movement.
Look, there are 12 people in a similar situation to Andy. Some have been released. What does this say about whether Hong Kong is safe anymore for people to even, have freedom of speech?
I think the truth is that Hong Kong is not safe for people who want to try to express themselves in the normal way. But Hong Kong is full of pro-democratic activists. Their last legitimate election showed that very, very clearly in 2019. The district council elections returned a huge, overwhelming mandate for democratic candidates. So they are there. We know they're there. They're just being forced to be silent or to find different ways to express their opposition to authoritarian rule. They are in the majority. They just can't be active in their usual ways. So, yeah, I think it's not safe for traditional activism, but they will find other ways. And I wouldn't bet against the ingenuity of the Hong Kong people.
Look, you've launched a global campaign. It involves more than 100 politicians from around the world. What action do you want foreign governments, like Australia's, like the United States, what action are you asking them to take to help people like Andy Lee who are rotting in prison?
We need governments to raise his case, and there's a good reason for that. The received wisdom is that if there's a lot of noise around these cases from foreign countries, that China will think twice about treating them like some kind of commodity that can be thrown away, which they've done to so many activists. The reason we're trying to make noise around Andy's case is it truly is emblematic. This is a guy who never advocated violence. They're trying to frame him as some kind of dangerous character. He is not. He is just somebody who was trying to fight for the promises that were made to Hong Kong to be fulfilled, promises that were made by the UK and by China and that are guaranteed by a treaty which is lodged at the United Nations. That is all Andy Lee has done, nothing more than that. If that's his crime, then the people who need to be defending him are the governments who are supposed to be the custodians of that treaty, who are supposed to defend it. They're not doing that at the moment. And we are saying, look, if you care about the Sino-British Joint Declaration, like you're supposed to, you have to care about Andy Lee.
Yeah. Luke de Pulford, it's terrific to have you on the show. The work you're doing, not just with this, but also, raising the oppression of Uyghurs in the Xinjiang region is just so important and courageous. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Sherry.